I would like to start this week's revision with some more pronunciation practice and some repetition of the more tricky aspects of German pronunciation. Depending on the phonetic system of your own native language, German sounds may come very naturally to you or possibly sound very difficult and hard to imitate. For that reason, I would always advise you to use the speech pauses in between sentences during my lessons and imitate what you hear, including word stress and intonation patterns. For today, let's look at German vowels one more time. On top of these, German also has 3 umlaute that are very particular to this language. Let's read them together one more time. A, A, O, O, U, U, E, E, I, I, Ä, Ä, Ö, Ö, Ü, Ü. I assume the difference between a regular vowel and an umlaut sound will become more clear to you if you hear them used in a proper word, contrasted against each other. I will read each pair 3 times. Please read after me. Plan, Pläne, Plan, Pläne, Plan, Pläne. Ton, Töne, Ton, Töne, Ton, Töne. Hut, Hüte, Hut, Hüte, Hut, Hüte. Furthermore, you will have found that the letter S, depending on what other letter it is combined with, will sound differently. In the combination with the letter P at the beginning of the word, it sounds like Sp, Spiel, Spiel. If SP, however, occur together in the middle or end of a word, it does not. Then it sounds normally like Sp, Sp. Here we have it at the beginning of a word, Spiel. Also, the combination of SCH sound like Schwester, Schwester, schlecht, schlecht, Deutsch, Deutsch. You can see that it does not matter if SCH is found at the beginning or end of the word. It is always pronounced like sh. The combination of CH alone after a darker vowel like A, O, or U sounds like lacht, lacht, or Nacht, Nacht. However, CH after a lighter vowel like E or I sounds like schlecht, schlecht, sprechen, sprechen. Here you have the SP combination again as well. Lacht, Nacht, schlecht, sprechen. And last but not least, remember that the combination of E and I sounds like Zeit, Zeit, weinen, weinen. I will begin every revision lesson with some potentially tricky to pronounce words, so that over time you will recognize more and more patterns and be able to correctly pronounce a word when you read it. In this week, we have also deepened our knowledge about articles and pronouns. You will remember from week 1 that we already learned the personal pronouns in singular. Ich, Du, er, sie, es. On top of that, we have learned how to use the possessive pronouns in the first and second person singular. Mein, meine, depending on whether the noun that follows it is masculine, feminine, or neuter, and dein and deine, with which we can express possession or belonging of the noun that follows after it. The forms for the third person singular as well as all the plurals are going to be taught in week 3. Concerning the articles, German, like many other languages, differentiates between definite and indefinite articles, like the English words wie and a or n. German distinguishes between 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter, for which the forms are der, die und das for definite articles, and ein, eine, ein for indefinite articles. Also here, we will talk more about plurals next week. Those plurals that we will already talk about today are the plurals of nouns. So if you have already reviewed some grammar instructions about German plurals, you will find that there will be so many different rules and exceptions that my personal recommendation to you is don't concern yourself with the rules. The time and energy it takes to memorize them is more than the time it would take to learn them by heart. So that is exactly what I am recommending you to do. Learn them by heart. In every future revision lesson, I will show you the plurals of all the nouns you have studied in that week in one spot, so you can study them in a conscious effort, which is frankly speaking the only way to do it. There is no shortcut. So let's start with those nouns that take the same forms in singular as they do in plural. Only the articles der, die, and das will change to die in plural, no matter what gender the noun has. They all become die in plural. Der Winter, die Winter. Der Sommer, die Sommer. Das Essen, die Essen. Das Wetter, die Wetter. Das Wasser, die Wasser. I personally have never used water in plural, and I think neither will you, but there exists a form in case you might ever need it. Next, we have those nouns that merely add an E at the end to form the plural. Der Tag, die Tage. Der Freund, die Freunde. Das Spiel, die Spiele. Der Film, die Filme. Then there are nouns whose vowels are changed into umlaute on top of adding an E to the end of them. This, of course, only works with nouns containing a, o, or u, because only these vowels have equivalents in umlaute. Die Nacht becomes die Nächte, umlaut plus I at the end. Der Plan, die Pläne. Der Saft, die Säfte. Some nouns form their plurals by adding an S at the end without changing anything else. Der Park, die Parks. Das Büro, die Büros. Der Café, die Cafés. The next category of nouns seems a bit more complicated. What they all have in common is that they add an ER at the end of the plural. However, additionally, those that have the vowels a, o, or u in them also change those to the equivalent umlaute. Nouns containing e or I do not have that change. Das Haus becomes die Häuser. Das Buch, die Bücher. Das Geld, die Gelder. Das Kind, die Kinder. You see that Geld and Kind have a lighter vowel with no equivalent in umlaute, so it does not change. It only adds ER at the end, whereas Haus, A becomes Ä, and Buch, U becomes Ü. This category of nouns does not add anything to the end, but only changes A, O, or U vowels into their umlaut sounds. Der Garten, die Gärten. Der Bruder, die Brüder. Der Vater, die Väter. Die Mutter, die Mütter. Next up, nouns that add en to the end only. Das Bett, die Betten. Die Zeitung, die Zeitungen. Die Frau, die Frauen. Die Zeit, die Zeiten. Or nouns that add only an n. Die Küche, die Küchen. Die Schwester, die Schwestern. And last but not least, loan words ending in a y, like in English, usually just change that y into an ies, like in babies. Das Baby, die Babys. The logic seems all over the place, even to a German person sometimes. As explained, I recommend you to just invest the extra learning effort into studying the plurals together with the nouns here in the revision lessons. That really appears to be the easier way, in my personal opinion. I would also like to repeat some vocabulary explanations that have been covered in the lessons but might need some extra repetition to become a bit clearer. The German verb lernen has two potential meanings in English. The first one refers to the actual process of sitting down and feeding information into your brain, but also the type of learning you do when you learn to swim or ride a bike. And the other one is really just about studying a topic or subject or language as you do in school. However, please note that German has a separate verb for studying at university level, which is studieren. Looking at our example sentences, ich lerne Deutsch, in the sense of I study German by myself or at school, that doesn't matter. But ich studiere Deutsch, I study German at university level, a different verb used here. Or ich lerne abends nicht gut, in the sense of I don't memorize things well at night. Similarly, the verb hören can refer to the physical act of hearing sounds, as well as the deliberate act of listening to something or someone, like listening to music. Both contexts use the same word hören in German. Ich höre nicht gut, in the sense of I don't have good hearing. Or ich höre oft Musik. I often listen to music. Coming back to last week's revision about negations, you will remember that we have studied how to negate a verb in a sentence using the word nicht, by adding nicht to the end of the sentence after the object, if there is one. So the structure is subject plus verb plus maybe object followed by nicht. And there we have the negated sentence. Ich esse nicht. Ich mag das Buch nicht. In the case of adjectives, we have learned to put nicht right in front of the adjective that it negates. What I would like to add today is that the same applies if we use an adverbial or any type of addition concerning time, place, cause, and mode of the activity taking place. For example, der Winter ist nicht warm. Sie spricht nicht gut Deutsch. Er sitzt nicht im Park, er sitzt im Garten. In the first sentence, we have negated the adjective warm, nicht warm. In the second sentence, we have negated an adverb that was describing speaking. Sie spricht gut, sie spricht nicht gut, putting it right in front of the adverb. In the last part, we are negating the location in which the activity sitting is taking place. So it is not taking place in the park, it is taking place in the garden. Er sitzt nicht im Park, er sitzt im Garten, putting it right in front of the adverbial that we are negating. In summary, we put nicht before an adjective or an adverbial in order to negate it. Now I would like to dive a bit deeper into the concept of adverbs or adverbials, as they are very important in German grammar. But first of all, I want to attempt to explain to you what the difference between an adverb and an adverbial is, because these two are so similar that the terms are often used interchangeably. The term adverb refers to the class of word, like nouns, verbs, adjectives, and so on. You will typically find the class of a word stated in any decent dictionary. The tricky thing is, however, that one and the same word can belong to more than one word class. Like, for example, the English word well can be both an adverb and a particle to begin a sentence with when you need some time to think about what to say. A typical example of a pure adverb is the word gern in Ich lese gern, with gern describing the verb lesen. An adverbial, however, refers to the grammatical function of a word or phrase in the context of a sentence. Ich lese im Garten is an adverbial of place, as it specifies where the action of reading is taking place. However, im Garten is composed of a preposition, an article in their contracted forms, and a noun, none of which is a proper adverb in itself. Only in their combination and function in the sentence they become an adverbial. In that sense, you can kind of think of it like this, that every adverb is an adverbial, but not every adverbial is automatically an adverb. I hope that makes sense to you. Believe me, if it doesn't, that's not going to be too much of a catastrophe either. In the end, we don't want and don't need to go too deeply into linguistics. What I would like you to understand, however, is that adverbs or adverbials are usually placed after the verb that they modify in a sentence. Ich esse im Bett. Ich lese oft. Ich habe morgens Hunger. Er spricht schlecht Deutsch. Sie trinkt sehr gern Kaffee. Marked in red are the adverbs or adverbials, and underlined the verbs that they refer to. But you might remember from last week's lessons that you can also start the sentence with an adverbial, putting it in the first position of a sentence instead of at the third. In that case, we have the adverbial in the first place, while the conjugated verb remains in the second position. That part is really non-negotiable. And the subject falls into the third position of the sentence, which leads to this subject-verb inversion that we spoke about previously. These sentences are equally correct, but they emphasize the adverbial much more than the example sentences on the left do. If you do not want to place particular emphasis on when, where, or why something is happening, just put it after the verb and you're going to be fine. Im Bett esse ich. Oft lese ich. Morgens habe ich Hunger. Schlecht spricht er Deutsch. Sehr gern trinkt sie Kaffee. But, no matter what you do, the finite or conjugated verb always remains in the second position. Now we are returning to the conjugations of regular German verbs, of which we only had one example last week, and that was the regular verb bleiben. In German grammar, we often refer to regular verbs as so-called weak verbs, whereas irregular verbs are often called strong verbs. Weak verbs do not change their verb stems, whereas strong verbs usually do. Note that the verb stem is what you get when you remove the typical German verb ending en, and you are left with the stem form. Bleiben. Ich bleibe, du bleibst, er bleibt. Sitzen. Ich sitze, du sitzt, er sitzt. So now you will ask why there is an exception here if those verbs are supposed to be regular. And right you are, but these modifications are based on pronunciation requirements and not on grammatical stem changes. The verb stems of verbs ending in s or z do not change the ending for st for the second person singular, because the s sound is kind of already included in the stem. Therefore, for phonological reasons, the s is not repeated in the ending, but the sound is kind of the same. Du sitzt, er sitzt. Similarly, in the case of verbs ending in d or t, like arbeiten, it is very difficult for the tongue to roll right from a t to an st or another t in the third person. Therefore, we add a filling e, just to make the pronunciation easier for the tongue. No worries, I will highlight all such modifications in any future verbs that you will study with me. All conjugations will be included in every week's revision lessons. The remaining verbs of this category are absolutely normal and regular. Spielen, ich spiele, du spielst, er spielt. Lachen, ich lache, du lachst, er lacht. Weinen, ich weine, du weinst, er weint. Leben, ich lebe, du lebst, er lebt. Lernen, ich lerne, du lernst, er lernt. Hören, ich höre, du hörst, er hört. Lieben, ich liebe, du liebst, er liebt. Trinken, ich trinke, du trinkst, er trinkt. These, of course, are only the singular forms of the verbs. We are also going to learn plural in the upcoming lessons. Coming now to the conjugations of irregular verbs or strong verbs with stem changes, please just do yourselves the favor to just study them as they are, like we did in the case of nouns in plural forms. You will recognize some patterns and rules in those stem changes after a while. For now, please trust me and take them as they are. Sein. Ich bin, du bist, er ist. Essen. Ich esse, du isst, er isst. Mögen. Ich mag, du magst, er mag. Lesen. Ich lese, du liest, er liest. Schlafen. Ich schlafe, du schläfst, er schläft. Sprechen. Ich spreche, du sprichst, er spricht. In some of these cases, you will only find a stem change of the vowel, like in essen for the second and third person, but not for the first person. So es becomes is in the stem form for the verb essen. In the case of schlafen, for example, the second and third person become umlaut instead of a as it was in the infinitive. Marked in orange is again just phonological modifications, not an irregularity in itself, because those stems end in an S or Z, having already the S sound included in it. Haben. Ich habe, du hast, er hat. And last but not least, here's another summary of all the new vocabulary you have been learning in week 2, grouped by their word class. You have studied 104 German words by now and can already form several shorter or longer sentences. I will read the vocabulary quickly without translations. Please refer to lessons 1 to 4 of this week if you are not sure about any of them. Nomen, das Spiel, die Musik, der Plan, der Mann, die Frau, das Kind, der Film, der Bruder, die Schwester, der Vater, die Mutter, das Baby, das Büro, Deutschland, Deutsch, Englisch, Französisch, Spanisch, das Essen, der Hunger, der Durst, der Kaffee, der Saft, die Zeit, das Geld. Pronomen, mein, meine, dein, deine. Possessive pronouns in this case, as there are several categories, as you already know. Verben, spielen, lachen, weinen, arbeiten, leben, lernen, hören, lieben, sprechen, trinken und haben. Adverben, nur, sehr, oft, viel, wenig, ein bisschen, meistens, zu. Adjektive, langweilig, interessant, gut, schlecht. And last but not least, Partikel. Bitte, danke und ja.